why is it that psychologically we deal in opposites? There, physically, there are opposites. There is the day and the night, there is the sun and the shade, there is the warm and the cold, and so on. But psychologically, also, do the opposites have to persist, have to exist? Is there happiness and sadness, pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow? And is our pleasure, is our happiness or joy for that matter dependent upon the existence of its opposite? Can we really identify good if there is no bad put in its contrast? Or does the good only has to exist when the contrast is there? The existence of the good inherently will depend on the existence of bad, and if there is no such thing as bad, do we even know what good is? Or does, if there is no so called bad that exists, does the good that we know of even exist? Can we call the relief, the freedom, the pleasure that we have independent? Or do they only have meaning and their existence when their opposite is also there? And because when there is the opposite and we move into the other direction, from pain towards pleasure or from the bad towards what is good, only then we are able to identify what is actual good or actual joy. Without sorrow, is there no joy? Without the bad, is there no real goodness? Or without the everlasting pain, is there no deep inward pleasure? Is the origin of the good, the pleasurable, the joy dependent upon the origin of the other, of its opposite? Then what we find here is whatever so called positive that we have is dependent upon the existence of the negative. Is there goodness that is free from the bad? Is there a certain health which is free from what is unhealthy? Do we give our time to finding out do we give our time in finding out what is real goodness, or it will only exist when there is the bad? Because if that's the case and the two are interdependent, the opposites are bound to exist, and our movement will always be from one corner to the other. We are in a sense cursed to this pendulum swinging movement from one end to the other, from one pole to the other. There is no then the question of real freedom, because our freedom will always depend upon freedom from something. In itself there would be no such thing as free. In itself there would be no such thing as love, because our definition of love would always depend upon that which we hate. which we realize as something cruel or an object of hate. All our bravery would be a certain reaction to cowardice, and we would be only be able to identify what is really brave when it is juxtaposed to the definition of cowardice. Fearlessness would always be bound to what we fear. If there is no such thing to fear, are we really fearless? Are we bound to feel a certain relief only after we have experienced a period of stress? And if that's not the case, if we haven't been stressed upon, or if we haven't been so tired that we would never feel relaxed or in relief, and if there is not this movement of the opposite, there is just a blank, that there would be no actual relief or relaxation without having stress or a tiredness, that there is no real health which is independent of that which is unhealthy. Because what we identify as health, what we identify as love, what we identify as good, that all of these things are mere reactions to their opposites. In themselves, there is no independent existence of what is good, of what is love, of what is really healthy. They have no independent existence of their own. It is only in reaction to what is bad, unhealthy, and hate that we are able to identify what is healthy, what is love, and what is good. And so we have to ask ourselves that does real goodness and independent love and independent health even exists or not, or we are cursed to this dualistic movement from one pole to the other. How can that which is really good or healthy can only come about when it has its opposite? Because if the health is real and if the goodness is there which has its independent existence, how can that be dependent on its opposite? And so if we are to find out that which is really good, that which is actually healthy, we are to discard what appears to be healthy in contrast to what is unhealthy. We have to discard what appears to be good in contrast to what is bad. We have to discard, neglect, negate the love that we experience as a reaction to hate. Only in this negation, only through denying what we know as the opposite of the other, can we come upon a real independent goodness, a certain love whose origin doesn't depend upon its opposite, a certain health which doesn't depend upon what is unhealthy. Because in being caught up in this dualistic sort of goodness, love and health, we might just be completely devoiding ourselves of the real thing and keep on operating and functioning within these two dualistic poles that we have set for ourselves. Our movement will always be from one end of the pole to the other end of the pole. In observing that these two poles are not different from each other but are actually one, we might just stumble upon what is really real. As long as we depend upon stress to give us relief, as long as we depend upon pain so that we can experience the pleasure, our experience of the pleasure and of the relief would be incomplete, would be a false experience that in which we find solace in, because if that relief or if that pleasure was actually the real thing, it wouldn't depend upon its opposite. If the pleasure, the relief that we seek in our efforts to escape the pain and the stress had any real potency, it would have provided us an everlasting relief or an everlasting pleasure. The fact that we come back demanding more and more pleasure and relief from the already existing stress and pain in which we are in shows us that it is not the real thing. Those pleasure, that relief that we may experience momentarily is probably just momentarily, because it carries the seed of that pain, of that stress, and those pleasures and reliefs are the shadow of that pain, of that stress that we know very well. So how can that which contains its opposite, which contains the seed of its opposite, can give us what is total, whole and complete? In those pleasures and the relief that we seek are the imprints, are the seeds of pain, of hurt, and to expect to be healed from such a relief is naive, because that which really heals wouldn't hurt us in the first place. And we would hear in popular culture, in songs or in movies, that I would want to be the one to hurt you so that I can heal you. This sort of a narrative is established upon a dualistic movement, in the movement of the opposites, because we only know healing in contrast to what is hurt, we only know goodness in contrast to what is bad, because for the existence of the hero, the villain is necessary. If a hero, for their heroism depends on an existence of a villain, then the real villain is the hero himself, because for it to express itself, because for him to express himself, he has to fight the bad guy. And if there is no bad guy, there wouldn't be a good guy either, there wouldn't be a hero either. Is such an individual really a hero whose heroism depends upon an existence of the villain? Because a real hero would be a hero in himself, irrespective of the existence of a villain. The existence of a villain wouldn't validate the existence of the hero. As long as the hero, for its existence, depends upon a villain, the hero himself is a villain. because he needs a villain to declare himself as a hero. And so it turns out all our heroes are actually villains. To see, to observe for oneself this dualistic movement of pain and pleasure, of unhealthy and the healthy, of the bad and the good, is to free oneself from the curse of the opposites. And in that freedom, in that space, on this vast ground, maybe we can find that which doesn't rely on its opposite, which doesn't have a dependent origin, which doesn't depend on the other for its existence, and in which these opposites dissolve themselves, and in which these opposites cease to be. And probably that is the field where you find that which is beyond the right or the wrong.